Hello, welcome to Deeper Delve. This is Peter Adkison. I'm here with Steve Connard, and we co-direct the Chaldea series. And we are here today to chat it. We're back to chat it up about Chaldea content. We haven't done a Deeper Delve in almost a month or so. We kind of got distracted. But we're going to make up for lost time because this is going to be this is actually the first Deeper Delve we were ever going to do about Anumians, which are a big deal in the Chaldea cosmology, in the world, and so on.
Well, I recall we decided, a long time ago when we were working on how to navigate the Great Sea, the Anumians sort of came out of developing how the Great Sea works. You were very adamant that the Great Sea is this endless mystical sea where the lands are floating. And of course, then I'm always like a map guy. And I'm like, well, how do I get from point A to point B? And then you started going into all this like, well, the navigation's done through like mysticism and cosmology and all kind of things like this, and astrology and ley lines and, all this sort of stuff. And as soon as you started like laying out that there are all these constellations, I said, well, the constellations need to be our constellations. They need to be cool and unique, not just steal them from Earth. And then that's where.
I think you're right. I think the idea for the Anumians, first of all, let's cover the basics. Like, what do they look like? So Anumians are constellations. They look like constellations up in the sky. So if you're in Chaldea and you're like, look up in the sky, behold the glory of the Chaldea night. You see these constellations like in our world, only I always thought like in our world, the constellations like, oh, that's a Big Dipper, huh? I don't really see it. Or, that's a scorpion or whatever it is. I said, Steve, let's make our constellations, first of all, colorful and pretty obvious what the constellation is and what it looks like. So that's number one. So that's what the Anumians are, our constellations, only they're not actual stars that are far away, billions of years in galaxies and stuff like that. That's way too sci-fi for us. This is fantastical versions of constellations. They really are spirits in the sky. The spirit of love, the spirit of war, the spirit of defeat, spirit of greed, forbidden love, et cetera, et cetera. And that's what they look like, is something that conceptualizes that. And they have that influence on society in very much like in astrology would have you believe in our world.
Illustrators would take the constellation and what they would do, Orion, for example, and they're like, I think there's a belt there, and I think out here's a sword or something. And then somebody would draw these faint outlines of what Orion would look like. And we're like, oh, if these were spirits, they'd have sort of, spectral light of the outline of what the creature, the person, or whatever the thing is. And we borrowed heavily from that.
Exactly. So that's what they look like. And Steve is right. When we were thinking about how the continents were arranged on sort of a map of Chaldea, which you might notice we've never showed you like the full map of what Chaldea looks like. It's because we can't, because they're not arrayed according to the way we would want them to be for our human minds in terms of like on a big XY coordinate system or on a sphere like the real world. No, all the continents drift on the Great Sea. And the Anumians are above them. And the Anumians, using astrology, not astronomy, these ships navigate the Great Sea by understanding the relationships between the Anumians and following them.
One thing they know is people have figured out is that there's some relationship between Chaldea and the plane of On, which is these spirits actually exist on a completely different plane. If you want to think about it as, a sandwich with two pieces of bread facing each other, Chaldea is down here infinitely flat with the ocean and the moving continents. And then up here is the plane of On, where all the Anumians live. And there's some relationship in between the two, which, sages and wizards and who knows what are all trying to figure out. Seers do a lot of studying of the Anumians. Anyway, they trying to figure out what the relationship is. And there is relationship. They both, you can go both directions.
Yeah.
And
yeah, if you can fly and talk to an Anumian, but there kind of are alien sort of types of figures who aren't necessarily easy to talk to. They're big sort of cosmic creatures up there in the sky. And when you look up at the sky, it doesn't feel like you're looking onto another plane. But technically, in technical magic speak, the Anumians are on a plane of On, which is adjacent up there.
Was created as part of the Age of Magic. So they are entities of magic. A good way to think about it is you say you could fly up there. If you watch some Disney documentary where somebody goes down and swims with big blue whales, you can swim with them. And isn't that pretty? They go by. But, the whole interaction thing is maybe they'll interact with you, maybe they won't.
Yeah, exactly. They're as much different from humans as humans are from animals, although not necessarily like a hierarchy of intelligence that way, and so on. The Anumians also have a relationships with each other and with ideas. Each Anumian is essentially a manifestation of some sort of concept, like greed, or war, or the universe, or what have you, like a sphere of influence of a god, very similar. And each Anumian is attempting to spread its influence across Chaldea. And the relationships, Anumians have relationships with each other based on these concepts in a way that's kind of easy to understand. Love and forbidden love have a positive relationship because they're both about love, but they don't have a very good relationship with hate.
Yeah.
Or monster or something like that, right? So the Anumians have different ranks or categories of Anumians. So the royal Anumians are Sun and Moon and Jester. And then there is the 52 noble Anumians, which are one for each of the 52 weeks of the year. The noble Anumians and the royal Anumians collectively are the Chaldea court. There are also other random Anumians that float in and out across the sky. Those are called visiting Anumians. They might be noble or royal Anumians in some other place in the cosmos. But the Chaldea court, if they show up in the Chaldea sky, they are visitors. And because Sun, Moon, Jester are the royalty here.
So it's pretty clear that Chaldeans, whoever they might be in the world of Chaldea, would look up, and these things that are up there every night, assuming you can see them. Sometimes there's bad weather and you won't see them, of course, but the calendar is based upon them. It's very easy. Like they show up and like this week is, Fermenter's week, or this is Mother's week, or hatred, or spring, or whatever. So anyway, it makes a lot of sense that people look up and like, oh, and so a lot of things through life are related. There's a lot of holidays that are based upon, which Anumian happens to be, on high today.
The idea of an Anumian manifesting during its week doesn't mean that that's the only time you'll see that Anumian. You could see an Anumian any night, any particular Anumian. You might see them on any night. You might see them in any location in Chaldea. But during the week of Ballerina is going to manifest that week particularly brightly. And her influence over discipline is going to be particularly strong that week. And there's also Anumians for the seasons, like spring, winter, summer, fall. These are all Anumians. So in Chaldea, there's never a question of whether or not summer has arrived, because there's just like one night happens the same time every year when summer appears for the first time. Like, oh, it's summer now, and it's summer until fall arrives.
Yeah, so they do have a somewhat of a profound effect on the world. I mean, I think it's been documented that more children are born 9 months later after Mother's Week than any other time, and it's just 9 months later. Guess what? Become a bunch of kids.
Or love. So Sun, of course, has a big responsibility as one of the royal Anumians. Sun provides light and warmth to all of Chaldea. And this light and warmth is so strong that most of the Anumians cannot bear the presence of sun for very long. And so when sun shows up, that's why you don't see the other constellations during the daytime. You do see a little bit of moon. Moon is also a royal Anumian. Moon's work is primarily at night, however, but sun and moon have a close relationship, and the only time they can really spend time together is if moon stays a while, tarries, if you will, into the day and spends some time with sun, or arrives early in the evening.
You'll notice one thing that we call them sun and moon. We don't call the sun the moon. This is one of those things that also drives our editor crazy. Because if there's a particular scene we wrote and said the moon looked over at the jackrabbit, that actually happened. The moon looked over at the jackrabbit. He's like, well, I said moon looked over at the jackrabbit. He's like, oh, you need to say the moon looked over. It's like, no, it's moon. You don't say the Peter looked at the jackrabbit. You say Peter looked at the jackrabbit. So anyway, so we refer to sun and moon as sun and moon, not the sun and the moon. Anyway, it's a small little detail.
Maybe there's no the in front of jackrabbit either. Maybe moon looked at jackrabbit.
Right.
So we can drive each other crazy as well. Also, each Anumian has what we call a haunt, each of the noble Anumians. So we've, in our maps of Chaldea, we have mapped out where the Anumians like to haunt. This is just like a favorite place in Chaldea. Like Mother likes to haunt the Garden Forest. And so if you were to follow Mother in the night sky, she will likely eventually lead you to the Garden Forest, because she is usually on her way to the Garden Forest or on her way away from the Garden Forest.
Right. That's how navigation works a lot, is the simple navigation, not super experts, but the simple navigation is like, oh, well, if you know where certain people, the beast, is above Ogstad a lot. So, okay, well, if I see sort of like the North Star, if I see that, I know I'm heading in the right direction. Right. Like you said earlier, they do appear all the time. You can always see them in different places. So anyway, most of the time when you see them, they'll be just, they're where they normally like to haunt.
So one of the tools that Anumians use to spread their influence is the Fate deck. The Fate deck is composed of 55 cards, the 3 royal Anumians and the 52 noble Anumians. And each one of the cards, in the top half of the card, is what the constellation, what the Anumian looks like up in the night sky, the constellation, if you will. The bottom half of the card is sort of an open to interpretation, illustration of things that are, it's like one of those tarot card sorts of illustrations that you can look at and get ideas, or maybe the Anumians are influencing the thoughts of the seer or astrologer who is using the Fate deck to do divination.
So monster, for example, if you take a look at that card, there's lots of different examples of types of monsters, the boogeyman under the bed, or the thing that's in the closet, or the mysterious monster reaching across the void, it's coming through the wall. There's lots of different things that people, freak people out, scare you. So when you look at that, you can look at, there's other things like little salt on the floor, you use that to keep evil away. And of course, someone's sleeping, and of course, monster, you dream of bad things in nightmares. So,
and I just gotta say, we had a lot of fun designing these Anumians. I had a lot of fun coming up with sort of the concepts for the various Anumians in terms of what their influence was, and Steve had a lot of fun doing, the art direction on coming up with these illustrations is pretty complex in terms of thinking of all these sorts of different ideas of how do you weave those together into an illustration.
Well, I mean, the Anumians have a direct influence on Chaldea, and they have a direct influence on our story, a heavy influence on our story. So they had to fit within our story, and we needed to know how they affected our characters and places and locations and events and any number of things. And then as people will follow our story along further and further and further, they'll start to like, oh my goodness, these guys really have a lot of influence. There's an up-and-coming story we work on where they actually interact, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, Anumians can fight, but you really have to think of the Anumians as being involved in this grand soap opera. I kind of liken it to, what if there was a big royal ball and all these different people are at the ball, and you can kind of predict, if you're smart, like astrologers would be in Chaldea, how some of these Anumians are going to interact with each other based on their station, based on their sphere of influence. Just like at a ball, you could predict based on political alliances and so on and so forth. Sometimes this soap opera turns violent, and two Anumians will go at it. And when that happens, you could see big lots of stars falling and gas explosion. It would look like gas explosions and stuff like that. And it can be quite spectacular in the night sky. And this happens in one of our stories.
It's a lot of fun watching two Anumians throwing down. Just sit back and watch or run in fear. Erupting mountains, earthquakes, right? Cats and dogs living together.
Well, and that's where that's where the Starfall Gems come from, right? Steve came up with this great idea that, hey, if the Anumians, when they're fighting, or maybe they just get excited for some reason, and lights go streaking away, maybe those are gems that fall to the earth, and adventurers can go out and find one. Of course, yes, of course. So that, of course, immediately became part of Chaldea.
Well, of course. So as soon as you have like magical jewelry and gems and things of this nature, the Arkenstone, the Numian gets a piece of its body solidifies, a piece of solidified energy turns into a gem of some sort, and it plummets into Chaldea. Of course, Chaldea I would say, is mostly water. If you did the percentages, it's got to be way up there. So most of if one falls, it'd probably hit the water. So that means on a really ultra rare occasion, it hits land. And then if you happen to be, where did it hit? On top of a mountain or in a swamp or who knows where. And if you actually get one, then they get crafted into magical items. They're worth a ton.
Yeah, for sure. Also, at one point in Chaldea history, an Anumian got into a fight or something and actually was destroyed. Like the entire Anumian wiped out, dead, gone, bye. And people know that, historians know this, because the Anumians are linked to the calendar. Each week in the year is associated with the calendar. And in history, you go back far enough, you can find records of things that happened in the week of Fortitude. But Fortitude? Well, there's no Anumian named Fortitude. So apparently there was at one time.
Well, it goes to show that, these things are, they're considered immortal, sort of, the immortal spirits of the sky. But they're not immortal from the point of view that they can't be, I don't even know if killed is the proper term. Made to go away, no longer exists. They're not there anymore. There's a famous individual, Nabu Pabu, who's probably the most famous person renowned for studying the Anumians. He wrote a lot. Pretty much, he wrote the book on Anumians.
Yes. Within Chaldea history, at one point, several centuries ago, a Akkadian king commissioned Nabu Pabu, who was a famous astrologer of the time, to travel Chaldea and collect stories of Anumians and individuals who had used astrology to seek the help of Anumians, using the fate deck, and to catalog the experiences that he found. And these are all inscribed in cuneiform tablets at the various universities around Chaldea have some of these tablets. And so Nabu Pabu, his records are pretty well known for establishing the basics of who the Anumians are and what they're known for.
Yeah, I think he came away from the experience believing the Anumians really affect people.
For sure.
And I also think he came away with a lot of warnings going, yeah, best not to summon him.
Yeah. Nabu Pabu takes a position that you don't ever call on the Numians for aid because it is horrible and dire if you do so. And here are all these stories of horrible things that have happened to people that did this. But when you read them, you find out, well, it's not always that dire. Sometimes it's actually good. But how often does it have to be bad before it gets a warning? Yeah.
Well, it's important that what we're hinting at here is people go to Sears and they use fate decks and they call on a boon from the Anumians to help them with something in their life that they obviously think is important. Now, we're going to do a whole deeper delve in the future on pretty much every one of the nobles and the royals. So there's going to end up being 50, what's the math again?
55
deeper delves at some point where each one, it's like, this is this week, that week, that week. So anyway, we'll go into detail here. And of course, Nabu Pabu will be the one leading the charge here with the information. But anyway, so people call on Anumians all the time. Please help me with my love life or with work or whatever their thing might be. And the results are not always exactly what people expect. But that doesn't mean it's not good or bad or either way. It's usually not what you expect.
And just like people who like to either believe in astrology in the real world or at least like to have fun with it. And like, what's your sign? Everybody in Chaldea knows what week they were born in. Like, why would you not? Of course, your parents recorded that information. And it's a very common thing that people ask each other what week they were born in.
Well, yeah, like I'm a Scorpio. I'm a Scorpio. Yay, Scorpios. And that means something, to a lot of people. Apparently, I'm obnoxious or something. But, it's being born under the sign of like, oh, well, I was on the drunken week, so I'm just going to be a drunk for the rest of my life. That's the excuse I need, right?
Right. All right. Well, that wraps up our episode of the Deeper Delve. If you can't tell, we love the Anumians. We had a lot of fun making this, and look for more Deeper Delves like our upcoming episode about the Great Sea and various episodes that we're going to have about various, each of the Anumians will eventually get some sort of treatment in this series. And please watch our main films and please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. And I certainly recommend you turn on notifications so that you get all updates about any new videos that we come up with. We also have a great website, www.worldofchaldea.com, where we put all of our principal storyline chapters, the unedited versions. And we also have our Chaldeapedia there, our Actoroki series. We also have podcasts that you can find in any podcast provider. And what else we got? Maps.
All the Anumians are there.
All the Anumians. Yeah, all the Anumians. We're talking about the Anumians. We can find the whole list of who they all are.
They're all there.
And the maps. Mini maps. Really good maps.
We like maps.
Maps are good.
Maps of the sky.
Maps.
Peace out.
Maps and more maps. I'm going to fade out. Maps.